in terms of what you call government corruption on roads, I don't understand it. And I like to just advise that sometimes government bureaucracy appears as if people are trying to game things. We must take some time to understand it, the way government works. Sometimes there are delays in government, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those delays translate ultimately to the fact that somebody wants to extort money. And I think we should be careful, or circumspect rather. Corruption is a very, very serious allegation. It's fraud. And if there is no evidence to support it, it is not an assertion that we should make freely. I've always asked those people who accuse other persons of having acted in that manner to say, are you willing? It would be a very nice thing if everybody who accused Mr. A of corruption swore an affidavit to say, I verify these facts. All the agencies investigating crime and corruption are beset, sometimes with petitions that have no basis. And so it clouds the attention from the real issues, the petitions that have basis. I would love to see a day where the law requires that every allegation of impropriety should be verified with an affidavit, so that if you make the allegation without basis at all, at least somebody will hold you to account for having sworn to a false oath. Now, but in terms of road development in Lagos, I just say Adeogun is an example. It was a partnership with Zenith Bank. Ademola is an example. It was a partnership with the co-hotels. Now, the question with data, it can be resolved. Easiest way to resolve is hold a census. Censuses should be held periodically, like every 10 years, so we are 1 year out. I'm hoping that we can either hold the census this year or hold it next year. But without prejudice to that, we are planning to have an electricity consumer census if the census doesn't come on time. Because what the books show today is that only 6 million people use electricity. That's not true. That's what's on the database.
6 million households.
Households, sorry. That's the right word. 6 million households use, and a household is one family. Most federal roads are not terribly bad. A federal road runs for hundreds of kilometers. But what we see is about 45-48% failure. So on a stretch of 100 kilometers, maybe sections as many as 10-20 kilometers have failed. Such that if you recover them back, now, in the East, there is a peculiar problem. It's an ecological problem of erosion, coupled with some high water table. So, and the unique nature of those roads do not necessarily transport, if you are talking of Nigeria, do not necessarily transport to saying that all the roads in Nigeria are in the same condition as that of the East. Because you now come to averages. That's why you are generalizing. And we must stop confusing a budget with cash. You owe us the duty to educate the public. A budget is not cash. It's a statement that I am going to the market, I plan to spend 10 naira. Do I have 10 naira in my pocket? It's not cash. So you have to earn the cash. And that's why a budget has a revenue and expenditure side. And when the revenues don't match the expenditure side, you fall into what is called a deficit budget, where you have to go and borrow. Now, all that we have had in the last 10 years, reported even by this organization, is that the capital budget has been below 20%. You have reported this severally. So where was the money voted? If we were spending less than 20% of our income, at the time we were earning $100 per barrel of oil, we were spending 80 on party and travel. So where was the money that was voted? It wasn't voted. When the budget of less than 20% capital were even passed, what were the releases? I will tell you the releases for 2015 inherited from the last administration. The last administration budgeted 18 billion naira in 2015 for all Nigeria's roads. 18 billion naira. As governor of Lagos State, the last budget that we did for infrastructure had, I think, about 200 and something billion in Lagos, and it wasn't enough to solve all the problems in Lagos. So if you budget 18 billion naira for all the federal roads, it just tells you what you were planning to do. Now, out of that 18 billion, I think all that they disbursed was about 9 billion or something. So the budget for housing was 1.8 billion naira for the whole of Nigeria. And the disbursement was 700 million naira. And I think the budget for power was 5 billion naira. Now, we have changed that with a budget of about 286 billion for works in 2016. About 80 billion for power and 35 billion for housing. Now, for the last 3 years, contractors haven't been paid in Nigeria. Go and interview them, go and ask, go and survey. So the first payment they are receiving in 3 years was in July 2016. Now, how does that translate to where we are? A federal road runs for hundreds of kilometers. So even if they have 2 trillion naira cash today, they can't build the road in 1 year. It's man hours, material deployment day by day. If you have 20 trillion naira today, you can't build this building in 1 day. There's no magic to it. You have to do it stage by stage. So that's our reality. Now, on the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, the relief you are seeing has cost us just over 22 billion. That's all they have received. So imagine if that 22 billion had been released on an annual basis. So we just lost time doing things that we shouldn't have been doing. And I want to continue to emphasize, this is this government's first full year budget. Started late. So all the implementation you have seen is about 7 months. Put it in context. So if this happened for 1 full year and another 1 full year budget ran its course, clearly there's promise on the horizon. Choosing roads, again, now is basic principle of greatest good to the greatest possible number, not to everybody. Now, we don't have enough money. Our choices are made by our realities. We want to revamp the economy. We can't build every road immediately. Some roads become more important than others. Which roads become more important? First, the roads that drive our economy. What drives our economy? Energy. So you must build roads that helps us to evacuate our energy resources, tankers and all of that. So you must build roads that evacuate the tank farms and helps you to distribute fuel. So Apapa and all of that become a major consideration. Lagos-Ibadan becomes a major consideration because that's where it now goes out through the country. Ilorin, Jeba, Benin Ore, Oyo, Ogbomoso, Sokoto, Ilela, Enugu, Port Harcourt, Aba Road, and those are the choices. Then you must look at the roads that also help feed the nation. Again, that route is the route that brings agro produce down from the northwest all the way down south. Cattle, vegetable, yams, tuber, and all of that. So those are the choices. Those are what inform the choices. Going forward, we will deepen those choices to 2017 to evacuate the increasing agro yields they're expecting. We have also taken data from strategic NNPC depots for pushing fuel across the country. Then we have looked at roads that carry the heaviest traffic, and we'll go from there to roads that carry less heavy traffic. We also want to intervene now in strategic bridges that are in disrepair. They haven't been maintained for decades, because we can't then have the roads and then the connecting bridges either over water bodies suddenly fail us. So those are the things that determine how we choose our priorities. For me, every time you get the opportunity to serve your country, as long as you are healthy enough to do the job, as long as you have ideas to pass across, you must not shirk the opportunity. If you do, you will lose your right to complain if things are not done well. Now, it is also not correct that I am only one minister. We're two ministers in that ministry. And so it's important. I have a minister of state who will work together. I have two permanent secretaries, very, very experienced and hardworking people. I then have directors, and I have assistant directors, and then we have public servants. And I think that it is also important, perhaps if a study was done about the role of ministers in other countries. Because I see my role really as resetting the focus, leading the team. So,
You're not driving the cranes.
yeah, so management, sharpening focus, sharpening commitment, renewing dedication is really the heart and soul of. I'm not the one who is going to go and build the power. I'm not an engineer. But getting budget in place, and I think I want to dwell on this, all of the gaps we had before is ensuring and understanding that, look, without a budget, we are going nowhere. So prioritizing the budget, ensuring that budgets are on these roads, that's why we can now start work. Okay? Dealing with letters and files, responding to the public. Unfortunately, in my ministry of power, I'm an end user of petroleum product, gas. It's just fuel for me. The point, therefore, is that I do not have ministerial responsibility for dealing with the problems in that area. But I want to say that my experience is that people will never be angry forever. Anger dissipates after time. And again, there have been conflicts, very, very consequential conflicts, even in Yoruba land. It ended eventually. And the end of that conflict ultimately signaled development for them. The message clearly is that there won't be prosperity, there won't be development, which is the basis or one of the bases of anger or disagreement while conflicts take place. It won't happen. Now, all of those who lead that region must understand this, even in their own enlightened best interest. That's the much that I would like to say about that. So it's not just about revenue for the country. It's about even the developmental mental program of that area for generations to come. In terms of maintenance, we are planning to start a maintenance program, but that requires, again, planning. What assets are we going to maintain? We created one back here, the Lagos Facility Management Office. It took time. We had to take an audit of all our schools, of all our hospitals, of all our roads, and all the assets. And then you had to prepare a program of scheduled and unscheduled maintenance. You also have to prepare work orders, because maintenance is also employment. It adds to the employment ability of government, and it also helps you to employ artisanal skills. So that is work also going on. So when I speak to planning, for example, I was asked, what are you planning? These are some of the things, but it's running repairs. I can't sit there and be working maintenance and not fixing roads. And it has very little to do with the number of ministries. It just has everything to do with sequencing what is priority first. Deal with priority first. Get the roads back. Put the economy in a place to compete. Then you can do the paper and program work. As far as corruption is concerned, it's a discussion that I think I would like to have on a more analytical basis, because I think we focus as a nation on part of what is a larger problem, the problem of law and order. We have also focused on corruption only in the public sector. And this is not to excuse anything or to defend anything, but how much is spent in the public sector in 1 year compared to the whole wealth of Nigeria? And I think that the larger focus should be law and order. And that is why I've made the argument, and maybe I should just close there, that when failures happen in compliance in developed nations, they call them scandals. So, when the parliamentarians in the UK were found stealing public funds for their, they call it political expenses scandal. When Lionel Messi was involved in tax, they call it tax evasion scandal. The reason is that they have focused so much on law and order that non-compliance is the exception. And so when you do not comply, the society is scandalized by the non-compliance. I rest there.